Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Ramadan Journey. I am your host, Afif Khan, and we are joined by Imam Muhammad al-Asi, the author of the Ascendant Quran. In the world today, Muslims often have to participate in discussions where the Islamophobia mindset tends to dominate. And when involved in such discussions, Muslims are often put in the hot seat when the subject of jihad and qital comes up. The Ascendant Quran gives Muslims the material they need to participate in such discussions forcefully and intelligently. And of course, we are fortunate to have the author of the Ascendant Quran here with us, Imam Muhammad. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
When it comes to a discussion of jihad and qital, a lot of times, as you had mentioned in the previous program, we Muslims, we tend to shoot ourselves in the foot before the discussions even get started. There are some Muslims who say that jihad is all about exertion, and they're very comfortable with human exertion in all areas except in the area of disciplined force against tyranny. And there are other Muslims, on the other hand, they think that Islam is only jihad and qital. And so when it comes to the issue of jihad and qital, where do we Muslims stand, and what does Islam say about it?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Rahmatillahi lil Alameen. Muhammadin an-Nabi al-Amin. وعلى آله وصحبه الغر الميامين. The words jihad, the word jihad itself has become something like a scare tactic. If anyone's reading the mainstream media, tuned into the mainstream media, it has right now, the mainstream media, it has a way of using jihad to develop a savage and a very uncivilized image of the Muslims. We can say that, there's a word that's made its presence known, Islamophobia. Well, that Islamophobia at its core, jihad is located. The word jihad and the way it is defined by the detractors and the adversaries of Islamic self-determination, the way they define jihad is becomes the fuel of Islamophobia. So we can say in this parallel sense we have jihadophobia. So what is it? What do they say? Well, if anyone who tunes in, we don't have to cover the volumes of misrepresentations about jihad, but they characterize it as synonymous with terrorism, the T word. And if anyone was objective and impartial to the whole issue, they'd refer themselves to the Quran and the Sunnah and look for the word jihad therein. Let's see, what does this mean? That's all it takes. But when Islam is the issue, then all objectivity and impartiality, they're thrown out of the window. No one wants that. And there are, agendas, and there are strategies, there are pre-plans. And so to serve those types of purposes and objectives, they give jihad their own definition, which gives a bad name to we the Muslims. Jihad, if we want to simplify its definition, is simply exerting all you have.
Your utmost effort.
Yeah, you give it all you have, you put in whatever you can in a context and in a direction defined by God the Creator. So it becomes something like the word jihad becomes something synonymous with struggle. It's a struggle. So people can struggle in different capacities, at different levels, within different circumstances. There's the everyday struggle of earning a living. There's a struggle with your internal self. You have something inside of you urging you to fall into sin. So you combat that urge inside of you. That becomes a struggle, a jihad. And then you have threats as a society or as a community, and you have to protect yourself. That becomes part of a struggle. So all of this, in a sense, life itself has this permanent feature to it of a sense of struggle. And there's nothing wrong with that. All human beings have that. It's a feature that is not a monopoly of Muslims. Everyone's in a, one way or the other, in a struggle. But what set Muslims apart in this human struggle is the fact that they have guidelines from God on how to pursue this struggle, to what extent, what quality it's going to have, when does it recede, etc. So no one should take the Muslims to the laundry shop for having a very well defined definition of their struggle inside the human self, inside human society, and inside the global context. That's, I guess, as simple as we can put it.
This discussion obviously is not over. We're going to come back and continue it in the next segment. We're going to take a short break for our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And welcome back. We are talking about jihad, and we're going to go ahead and continue our discussion. Does Islam license the use of principled force to reverse tyranny and aggression? And under what circumstances and under what preconditions?
Not only does Islam sanction the use of principled and moral force, but all other civilized expressions of civil society authorize the use of force in conditions that are defined as in defense of life, in defense of liberty, in defense of family, and in defense of community.
So why all the hullabaloo about Islam?
Because there's a lot of interests in this world at the levels of the elites that have coalesced. They've agreed among themselves. It's not a public agreement. It's not an advertised agreement. It's just a type of behind-the-scenes agreement that Muslims in the world are a free-for-all as far as they are concerned. There are a lot of resources in Muslim countries, and Muslims themselves can't get their act together. So if they need to use force to obtain those resources that Muslims have in their geographies and in their locales, they're going to use this force. Colonialists, imperialists, Zionists, they'll use this force. And then if Muslims think about countering this force, then all verbal and mental hell has to break loose and characterize these Muslims who are standing up for their rights as being bandits, or as being outlaws, or as being terrorists, as anyone can see in the world today. Muslims are just trying, in the different areas and countries that they live in, they're just trying to get on with their own structuring of their own society. You would think, in an open mind would think, hey, let them, I mean, this is their area, this is their country, let them do what they decide to do with it. But no, there's interference from the outside, from corporate globalism that wants to confiscate and monopolize the resources of Muslims. And when Muslims develop a muscle and a nerve and a backbone to say, no, wait a minute here. The petroleum belongs to us. The gas belongs to us. The phosphorus belongs to us. These natural resources belong to us. And if you're not going to, and this is enshrined in international law as far as the sovereignty of different countries are concerned, the freedoms that belong to the different populations of the world. When it comes to Muslims, they break their own international conventions and laws, and they say, Muslims now are open season, and they come in with their militaries, they occupy, they commit war crimes on a large scale, they displace populations in the millions, and then if Muslims think about defending their lives, their families, their livelihood, their wherewithal, all of a sudden it becomes jihadophobia, as we mentioned earlier.
Some of these people who are organizing this propaganda, they say that we're aggressing against you because you aggressed against us. And so can you tell us that, we know that as far as the predominant military industrial complex in the world is concerned, that it has close to 800 or 900 military bases around the world, and 1/3 of them are probably located in majority Muslim countries. Are there any Muslim military bases in the United States, or are there any Muslim standing troops in Europe and in the Western Hemisphere?
No, there isn't. Muslims don't have any bases in...
Do we have any intelligence operations in these parts of the world? Are we spying on them? What I'm trying to understand is that they say that we aggress against them and that they're responding. Where does this come from?
Yeah, it's a topsy-turvy world. There's no basis for this characterization of Muslims as being in an attack mode and aggressive against other populations and other geographies in the world. This simply doesn't exist.
They say that 9/11 is an attack on the Western world by Muslims. How do you respond to that?
Well, 9/11 is a very interesting subject. I think it merits probably a couple of hours to give it some type of fairness of discussion, and we don't have that luxury here. But 9/11, to put it, I know this is going to probably ruffle some feathers, but 9/11 is a very well thought out policy used by imperialists and Zionists to undermine future Islamic self-determination. What they did was they meaning the imperialist head honchos, along with their Zionist colleagues, what they did was they saw that Islam was Muslims were beginning to wake up, and they were beginning to resist occupation. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to take the winds out of the sail of the Muslims and turn this legitimate jihad into a projected thrust of terrorism throughout the world. So they sponsored what is called Al-Qaeda and these other similar types of groups. They themselves, the imperialists and the Zionists, sponsored them without these types being aware that they were used in a larger program to discredit future legitimate jihad and Islamic self-determination.
Wow, this is really interesting. And again, I wish we had more time to discuss it. But as a teaser, you got something to look more deeply into. But at this time, we have to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Welcome Ramadan. Welcome Ramadan.
And we're back. We're talking about jihad. In this segment, we're going to talk about the killing of innocents, and we're going to reference so-called suicide operations, suicide bombings. Can you tell us, when is an istishhadi operation an act of jihad, and when is a suicide bombing not an act of jihad? And then can you put that in the larger context of the killing of innocents? A lot of times terrorism is portrayed as the number one problem in the world, as if it's massacring millions of human beings, innocent human beings across the world. And yet at the same time, we don't deal with the role of terror governments killing, in reality, millions of human beings.
Well, this is the irony of all of this. The ability of movers and shakers in the world, opinion makers, their ability to turn this whole issue upside down. They, and I point an obvious finger at the policy makers and decision makers in Washington and Tel Aviv and some European capitals. In particular, we can't go all over the globe with this, but these are the ones that are in the forefront, who are basically behind this recent explosive issue of terrorism. They are the ones, not some individuals who are on the run in some isolated, God-forsaken areas of the world, the mountains of Afghanistan or Tura Bora, or some deserts in Africa and in Arabia and all of this. These amount to nothing, practically speaking. They can't do all of this stuff that is projected to the public and gives a bad name and gives a negative image to Muslims all around the world. This simply cannot be done. This is done by an establishment, by a system, by a well thought out plan that was kicked off by 9/11, and it still continues to feed on events from time to time. Something happens in one city or the other in the United States, and it gets conflated into this act of terrorism. Very suspicious acts committed by unknown individuals, and then it's streamlined into this propaganda about terrorism. And what is meant by all of this is actually a master plan by the Zionists and the imperialists to fight fire with fire, so to speak. They see that Muslims are now in a new mode. They are beginning to assert themselves in their own countries, and self-determination is a few steps away. So before all of that culminates, they want to say, okay, you Muslims, you want to get involved in a struggle, we'll show you. And so they come in with their agents, with their provocateurs and their mercenaries, and they begin to commit atrocious acts, very inhumane types of behaviors that are flashed all over the world on the wide screens, the internet, satellite TVs, all sorts of media outlets, and say, look at what the Muslims are doing. Look what they're doing in Syria. Look at what they're doing in Afghanistan. Look at what they're doing in certain other areas. And it's not really, committed Muslims who are doing any of this. This is a mixed bag of Muslims who are misled, Muslims who are ignorant, Muslims who are looking for some type of livelihood, Muslims who are agents. When I use the word Muslims here, I'm referring to individuals who were born in Muslim families and who come out of what is referred to as Muslim cultures and Muslim countries. These are not Muslims in the Quranic or in the prophetic definition of who Muslims are. They're the type that وقالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. These are the types that are being taken advantage of by, where do they get their resources? Where do they get the money? Where do they get the arms and weapons and ammunition and all of this? They don't manufacture these things. These people have no military industry or anything. They obtain these things from sources. The weapons they get, the instruments they use to commit these acts. So where does this come from? Let's follow the dollar. Let's follow the financial and the weapon sources of these people who are doing these things. But no one wants to do that, because once you begin doing that, you're going to begin to discover where all of this is coming from. And here is where the tracks, the traces, and the steps of these individuals are eliminated. It takes you nowhere, because no one wants you to discover, wait a minute here, terrorism is a manufactured product of imagery by the imperialists and the Zionists used against Muslims of self-determination.
Well, I really wish we had a lot more time to discuss this, but unfortunately, again, we've run out of time. We're going to be forced to extend this into future programs. We do hope that you join in with us in the future programs to be aired in the next few days. At this time, we are going to go into a discussion on the subject of women. That'll be the subject of the next few programs. Until then, we'd like you to stay with us. This concludes the Ramadan journey for today. We expect, inshallah, to see you tomorrow. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.